Hey, welcome to Bible Floss. Derek here, and this is a picture of my little girl, Amelia Joy. She's almost 3 months old, and isn't she the most adorable person you have ever seen in your entire life? And Emmy will be raised in a culture and a day and age when women's rights and equality is greater than it has ever been in history, and it's bound to only get better. Today I'm going to introduce you to 14 women in church history who have done remarkable things, who have stood out and rose above the expectations of their culture and of their society. Now be warned, most of the stories of these women have sour endings, the price they pay for rising up and for choosing to be strong in the midst of a culture that wants to press them down. But I hope you'll be as inspired by their triumph and courage as I am. Now let's go. Meet Agatha, a 3rd century Sicilian woman born to a noble Roman family. Apparently Agatha was quite beautiful because she caught the eye of a Roman prefect who was rather amorous and tried to make some advances to her, which did not turn out good for anybody because Agatha made a vow of abstinence. Because she vowed herself and her sexuality to God. She wanted to remain pure and basically a virgin for her entire life. The Roman prefect did not like this very much, figured he would teach her a lesson, so he sent her to work in a brothel, which did not go over very well because apparently she was not very cooperative. Therefore the brothel sent her back to the Roman prefect, who therefore argued with her and tried to convince her to change her mind. She would have none of it, and so apparently he decided the best thing to do would be to cut off her breast, which he did, and then he put her in prison, but then he called her back out of prison and tried again, and she still chose to remain pure despite the pressure, despite the persecution, and so finally he ordered her to be burnt at the stake, except that apparently there was an earthquake which saved her life. They put her back in prison where she died of her wounds. And today, Agatha is remembered as the patron saint of breast cancer patients, and it's not difficult to see why. The last words uttered by Agatha were, "Our nobility lies in this, that we are servants of Christ." Now we come to a princess in Alexandria named Catherine, who was apparently a great debater and a noteworthy scholar, and who had reportedly converted hundreds of people to Christ. Catherine even traveled to Rome to convince the Emperor Maxentius to stop persecuting Christians and to stop worshipping idols. And so the emperor set up a debate between Catherine on one side and the empire's greatest debaters and orators on the other, and so a great debate ensued, and Catherine won the debates and even convinced many of her opponents to become Christians, at which point they were martyred for their faith. The emperor became furious and threw Catherine into prison, where pilgrims from all over came to visit her, and even the emperor's wife went to visit her and became convinced and converted to Christianity. So then what do you do if you are the emperor in this situation? You got this woman who seems to be converting everybody. She's smart, she's a brilliant debater and orator, and in fact she's even beautiful according to tradition. Well, you do what any emperor would do. You propose. And when she refused his proposal, he had her beheaded. Hildegard became abbess at the Cotengard in 1136. In 1148, she founded the Benedictine monastery of Rupertsberg. She's known for her prophetic visions, which were even approved by the Pope. These aesthetic and mystical experiences began in 1141. They were published in a book and widely read. Her experiences included visions, gifts of tears and computations, wisdom, knowledge, and prophecy, and numerous miracles are attributed to her. The next woman on our list is Jeanne d'Arblay. Her father was King Henry d'Arblay, and she was the mother of Henry IV. Jeanne was married off at the young age of 11, but that marriage was never officially consummated apparently, and so they made the marriage null and void by the time she was 16. She then later married Duke Antoine Bourdon, and together they ruled the throne of Navarre. Now Jeanne was raised by her mother to be an independent thinker, and as a result she embraced the Protestant movement, making her the most visible French reformer. She even became a student of John Calvin, and therefore embraced not just Protestant ideologies in general, but Calvinism in particular. During her lifetime, she did all she could to defend and help the Calvinists as they battled war against the Catholics in France, and when she became the sole ruler of Navarre when her husband was killed in battle, she became an even stronger advocate for the Calvinists, who, by the way, were losing the war really badly. And so Jeanne was strategically instrumental in bringing about peace through negotiations, which involved the marriage of her son to Prince Charles's niece. And as the marriage got closer, Jeanne got excited, and as she was going to the market and buying stuff for the wedding, she got really sick and died about 2 to 3 months before the wedding. Her son Henry did go forward with the political marriage in order to maintain peace between the Catholics and Protestants. But the marriage took place in Paris, which was not a very good idea because the reception of the ceremony turned out to be the occasion for what would later be known in history as St. Bartholomew's Day's Massacre. And so Jeanne's hope to maintain peace between the Calvinists and the Catholics resulted in the slaughter of hundreds and hundreds of Calvinists, including her own son, at the wedding that she arranged. But the Calvinists in Paris on St. Bartholomew's Day were not without hope because there happened to be someone in Paris who would rescue many of them, and her name was Renee. Renee was also born to French royalty and was raised a Catholic but converted to Protestantism. But Renee's Catholic husband, who was also the nephew of the Pope, did not agree with Renee's sympathizing ways towards the Protestants and declared that all sympathizers were heretics. Renee was dragged before the Inquisition, declared a heretic, and told that she had to deny her Protestant ways or else she would never see her children again. Faced with the possibility that she might never see her 2 children again, she recanted, and after her husband died, she picked up the cause of Calvinism again and happened to be in Paris when St. Bartholomew's Day would take place. She managed to save many people. In 1761, John Wheatley purchased a 7-year-old slave girl and christened her Phyllis Wheatley. He raised her as one of his family members, taught her to read the Bible, classical literature, and learned to love poetry. She became a writer. In 1770, she published her first work, which was called On the Death of George Whitefield. And in 1773, she was taken to London, where she astonished the British aristocracy with her poetry. And in fact, she was even invited to the courts of King George II. And it's said that George Washington loved to read her poetry. In 1778, when John Wheatley died, he made sure within his will that Phyllis was given full freedom. She then married another free slave named John Peters. Sadly, Phyllis ended her life with 3 kids, but in poverty, working at a boarding house. But her poetry has left her a great legacy and can still be found and read online today. At age 16, Harriet had become a Christian, and 2 years later she married Samuel Newell, and immediately the 2 of them headed off into the mission field to Calcutta, India. During the long voyage, she discovered that she was expecting a child, but when they arrived in India, the authorities had ordered them to leave. So they decided to go to the Isle of France, where both Harriet and her preemie baby would die. Harriet was the first woman missionary from America to die on the mission field. She was only 19 years old, but her death paved the way for many missionaries who would come after her because it quickened the sympathy for the cause of the missionaries. Anne Hasseltine Judson was the first woman American missionary, along with Harriet Newell, who traveled together on the same mission trip. She accompanied her husband to India and then to Burma, where he was imprisoned for his faith and for preaching the gospel. While he was in prison, she continued to preach the gospel, and in fact, she translated Matthew, Daniel, and Jonah into Burmese. When her husband had been released from prison, he found that Anne had slipped into a coma. She eventually died of tropical fever. This makes her the second American woman missionary to die on the mission field, next to Harriet Newell. At age 21, a Methodist convert named Mary was put out of her home because of her faith. But in 1768, with the legacy that was left to her by her grandparents, she was able to take over a farm in Yorkshire, where in spite of financial difficulties, she was able to take in and take care of destitute and ill orphans. In 1781, she married a minister named John Fletcher, but within 4 years, John died. Mary supported the new pastor and had a successful teaching class of over 100 students. Lydia accepted the Christian faith under the ministry of Eden Tucker, a Baptist missionary. Together with her sister, she helped form a church in Petersburg, New York, and after her marriage, she moved to New York City. Now, the thing about Lydia was that she was an invalid for most of her life, but her positive attitude and outlook on life made her home a welcoming place for so many Christians. She was a hymn writer and wrote some popular hymns including Take the Name of Jesus With You, I'm Weary, I'm Fainting, The Master is Coming, and she published a book called Gems by the Wayside. Phoebe was a young convert to Christianity who joined the Methodist holiness movement and claimed entire sanctification. She was a very popular preacher and speaker, and she traveled to Great Britain with her husband and to Ireland. She also authored about 10 books, including The Way of Holiness. But she wasn't just about personal piety, because she was also an active opponent to slavery and alcoholism. Sarah was a magazine editor whose persistent efforts made Thanksgiving a national holiday in the States. In 1863, she finally persuaded President Lincoln to issue the official proclamation of Thanksgiving. She was active in world mission organizations and was among one of the first women magazine editors in America. Frances was a convert to Christianity at 15. She knew 5 languages, including English, French, German, Italian, and Latin. She could also read the Bible in its original language. She was brilliant. She was a singer, she was a composer of music, she wrote hymns, and she was socially active, helping to take care of the poor. And she did all this in spite of the fact that she was often in poor health and very frail. Evelyn Underhill Moore authored about 33 books. She was the first woman to be a lecturer at Oxford in 1922. She was a much sought after retreat leader, and she visited the poor in London 3 times a week. And in 1939 she became a pacifist. Most of the women I mentioned today had sour endings, and I'd like to think that all of that's behind us because my little girl's going to be raised in a culture where women equality and rights are better than they've ever been in history. But 2 recent events that made it onto the media remind me that there's a lot of work to be done. If you don't know about those stories, click on the links in this video. And as they say in the Bible, Shalom. Thanks for watching. If there's a story of a woman in church history who has inspired you to be a better person, leave it in the comments below. I'd love to find out about them. And don't forget to subscribe.